Brian Robinson.
Have you ever heard this quote by Nietzsche? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You get divorced, you lose your job, you lose everything, and you're in the dirt. And a friend will say to you, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And you're thinking, how will a quote from an old dead guy really help me? But that does lend a question. How do you get through adversity? Well, I've discovered something that is so simple. It's your memory. Whenever I'm facing a difficult moment, I go back to the past and I remember. Madam Contest Chair, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests. It was the spring of 1994 and I was in one of the most beautiful places on earth, Kenya, East Africa. I had saved all my money all year and even borrowed some to go over to Kenya to buy merchandise from my import business that was almost ready to go bankrupt. You should have seen me. I had tourists written across my forehead. White t-shirt, khaki shorts, and a great big fanny pack up front. I only knew 2 words in Swahili, jumbo and habari, which means, hello, how are you? And I must have said that 50 times a day. Well, one night I was out working very hard, drinking beer, and I met this guy who had these big holes in his ears. And I walked up and I said, excuse me, Jumbo, I'm Brian. Are you from the Maasai tribe? And he said, my name is Louisa, and I am a Maasai. Now, I know you guys have seen pictures of the Maasais with the colorful beads and the long, colorful robes. Well, we started talking, and he said, you need to come visit our village. And I said, yes! So the next day, I rented a Jeep, and there was Louisa, that was his name, and his other friends, and we got in the Jeep, and we took off towards the village. We drove for 2 hours, and we saw giraffes and zebras and other Maasais, and it was awesome. And we pulled off onto a dirt road and drove another 30 minutes. Well, eventually we got out and we stopped and got some food. And when we got back to the Jeep, I said to Louisa, hey, why don't you go ahead and drive? I'm going to sit in the back and just check out the sights. So Louisa got behind the wheel and he took off. I mean, he took off. The Jeep started vibrating and I noticed 30, 40, 50 miles per hour. Louisa, slow down, slow down. And next thing you know, the Jeep flipped over. I don't know how long I was unconscious. But I remember when I opened my eyes, the Jeep was upside down and I was strapped with the seatbelt. And I could hear crackling glass. I unbuttoned the seatbelt and my white shirt was red. Somebody was screaming in the background and there was no one around. I was terrified. Well, miraculously, a big truck came by and they picked us up, they took us to the nearest town and we got into a private car and Louisa went with me and we drove to Nairobi to the hospital. Louisa must have seen the fear in my eyes and I remember his look. He said, Brian, there is a much greater plan for you because you are still alive. And I'm thinking, dude, where'd you learn to drive? 3 days later, I was laying in a hospital bed 8,000 miles away with 50 stitches on my face and on my hands. And every dollar that I brought for this flying trip was gone to pay for the hospital bills and the total Jeep. And I began to cry. Have you ever had a moment like that before? Well, the next day I got out of the hospital with 2 black eyes and with gauze wrapped around my head, and I was limping down the street when I heard this beautiful music coming from a church. I turned around, I walked up the stairs, and I sat on the back of the pew. And there was a minister. Does anybody have any good news to share? One person said, I got a new job this week. Another hand went up and said, my cousin is visiting. And then he said, Mzungu in the back. Mzungu meaning white man. And every head turned around, and I said, I'm Brian, and I almost died a few days ago, but I'm alive, and I'm so grateful. I remember when I walked out of that church, strangers came up and they hugged me. They said, we're glad you're alive too. And I will never forget that feeling. Now that was almost 18 years ago. And whenever I'm facing a difficult moment, I simply go back to the past. And I remember how I got through that experience. I even have a scar right here under my left eye from that accident. And I know that many of you also have scars from your past. Scars that were painful and hurt from divorce, from losing someone you love. But under those scars are depth, character, and strength. So when you're facing a difficult moment today, go back to the past, to that moment that almost killed you but didn't, and take the strength from that example. Bring it back to you in the present, and no matter what you're facing today, you can find a way to make it. Madam Contest Chair.